Share the emotional impact of hearing those words from your own child. Describe the years of sacrifice, love, and support you gave, and how it felt to be reduced to an inconvenience. There's a moment in life, one you never see coming, when the people you gave everything to look you in the eye and say something that breaks you. Not with yelling. Not with cruelty. Just quiet, tired words. Words like, "You're a burden." That was it. That was what my son said to me. Not, "I'm overwhelmed." Not, "I need help." Not even, "I don't know how to take care of you." Well, just that. "You're a burden." For words that shattered everything I thought I knew about love, about loyalty, about family. And let me be clear, I didn't need him to be a superhero. I didn't expect him to be perfect. I know I'm not. But I was his mother. I carried him. Fed him. I stayed up night after night when he was sick, when he was afraid, when the world felt too big for his little shoulders. And I never once, not once, thought of him as a burden. So when that word came out of his mouth, I didn't just hear it. Felt it. Settled in my bones. Made me question everything. Did I do too much? Did I love too hard? Was I too available, too present, too dependable? And maybe the hardest question of all. Was I wrong to think that kind of love would come back to me someday? You grow up being told that what you give, you get. That kindness comes full circle. That loyalty matters. But life has a cruel way of teaching you that not every story wraps up with a nice, clean bow. Sometimes the love you pour in doesn't pour back out. Sometimes it dries up. Sometimes the people you raise forget the price you paid to get them where they are. And that's what hit me hardest. Not the insult. Not the rejection. But the realization that somewhere along the line, he had rewritten our story. I wasn't mom anymore. I was a problem. Hassle. A thing to be managed. You know what that does to a person? Makes you go quiet inside. Makes you doubt yourself. You sit there in a quiet room in a nursing home, surrounded by strangers, with all your memories packed in a single suitcase, and you wonder if it was all a mistake. The birthday cakes you stayed up late to make. The tiny shoes you tied 1,000 times. The nights you rocked him to sleep when your own body was aching. You wonder if any of it mattered. And I did wonder. For a long time. I sat in that silence. I stewed in it. I broke in it. But here's what I want you to understand. This speech isn't about a pity party. It's not about getting even. It's about something far more important. It's about what happens after someone calls you a burden. What you do with that kind of pain. How you take something that was meant to shrink you and let it sharpen you instead. Because here's what I learned. Being called a burden didn't make me one. That label didn't stick. It didn't define me. It didn't rewrite the truth of who I am or what I've done. It only revealed who he had become, and what he had forgotten. You don't stop being a mother just because your child stops acting like a son. That love doesn't vanish. It evolves. It protects itself. Gets smarter. Quieter. Sharper. And in that quiet, I found something I hadn't felt in a long time. My own power. No. I didn't fight him. I didn't beg. I didn't yell. I let him hand me that label, and then I handed him something far heavier. Not revenge. Not guilt. Just the truth. The kind of truth that sits with you at night when the house is too quiet. The kind of truth that lingers in the spaces where respect used to live. And you better believe he felt it. He felt the absence. He felt the silence. He felt the difference between someone who shows up every time, and someone who won't show up again. Because once you've been called a burden, and you survive it, and you rise anyway, you don't go back to being someone's option. You become a lesson. There's always a moment where the air shifts. You can feel it in your gut before your brain catches up. Something just changes. That moment for me came on an ordinary Tuesday. Nothing dramatic. No fight. No tears. Just a cold, quiet decision delivered like a business transaction. We found a place for you, Mom. It'll be easier for everyone. Easier for everyone. I sat there at the kitchen table, the same table where I used to cut his sandwiches into little triangles, the same table where he did his homework and told me about his crushes and dreams, and I listened to my own son talk to me like I was a problem that needed solving. No emotion. No warmth. Just logistics. And let me tell you, the pain in that moment, it doesn't scream. It doesn't even cry. Just sinks. It sinks down into the deepest part of you, like a stone dropped in water. You can't stop it. You can't unfeel it. Just settles. I wanted to say something. I wanted to ask him, do you even see me anymore? Do you remember who I am? Or am I just furniture now? Something you move when it's in the way. But I didn't say any of that. I just nodded. Because there comes a point when silence feels safer than risking one more crack in your already bruised heart. And I get it. Really do. Life is fast. Life is stressful. People are juggling work, bills, kids of their own. I never wanted to be in the way. But there's a difference between needing space and choosing cruelty. Between being overwhelmed and being indifferent. And that day, my son didn't act like a man under pressure. He acted like someone who had already let go. That's what made it worse. This wasn't a spontaneous outburst. It wasn't him losing his temper. It was planned, decided, arranged behind my back. And I was just being informed. And you know what's wild? I didn't argue. Not because I agreed. Not because I was okay. But because in that moment I realized something. I wasn't going to beg for a place in a life I helped build. I looked at him, and for the first time I didn't see my little boy. I saw a stranger. A man with my son's face but none of the love in his eyes. And it hit me, whatever bond we had, he had already cut it. So I packed my things. It didn't take long. Years of my life. All the holidays, the birthday cards, the home-cooked meals, the little notes I used to leave in his lunchbox, condensed into 2 suitcases and a tote bag. That's what motherhood looks like at the end sometimes. A couple of bags and an Uber to a place with beige walls and a shared bathroom. And let me tell you something. I didn't cry when I left. I didn't want to give him that. But that night, lying in a twin-sized bed in a room that smelled like bleach and loneliness, I let it hit me. I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. I cried for every time I put him first. Every time I ignored my own needs. Every sacrifice. Every missed opportunity. And I cried for the woman who thought all that love would come back someday. That's when I knew this wasn't just about rejection. It was about erasure. He didn't just push me out. He rewrote the narrative. I wasn't mom anymore. I was a burden. Task to be delegated. Piece of paperwork. And that's when something inside me flipped. I don't know what to call it. Grit, rage, clarity. Maybe all 3. But I decided right then and there, lying in that hard little bed, that if he could reduce me to a burden, I could become a mirror. I wouldn't lash out. I wouldn't scream. I would show him exactly who he had become, just by being exactly who I still was. Because here's the truth. I may not have had much left in terms of money or power or freedom, but I still had my dignity. And I wasn't going to let him take that too. So no, I didn't beg to come back. I didn't try to make him feel guilty. I let him feel exactly what it's like to live with the absence of someone who loved you without condition. I let him sit in that silence. I let him carry the weight of his decision. Because the moment he turned his back, I stopped being the problem. And he became the one who had to live with what he'd done. You know what's wild? You think the worst part is the moment it happens. The betrayal, the dismissal, the cold words that hit like ice. But it's not. The worst part is what comes after. It's the quiet. Echo. The nothing. It's waking up in a place that doesn't smell like home, with nobody calling your name, and realizing, this is your new normal. That's what hit me hardest. Not the nursing home. Not the beige walls or the clatter of walkers down the hallway. It was the silence. The realization that the world just kept spinning without me in it. In those early days I went numb. I didn't want to talk. Didn't want to eat. I smiled when the nurses passed, but it was all surface. Polite. Hello. I felt like I had been unplugged from everything that made me me. And it's hard to explain that kind of grief to people. Because it's not just about losing your home. It's about losing your place in someone's life. It's about being erased. But here's the thing about being alone. You can't hide from yourself anymore. When you strip away the noise, the schedules, the distractions, all that's left is the raw, unfiltered version of you. And let me tell you, facing that version, it's terrifying, but it's also freeing. Because when you've been dropped so low that you're lying flat on your back, there's only one direction left to look. I started small. I started with little routines, making my bed even if no one would see it, brushing my hair even if no one cared. I took walks down the hallway just to feel my legs moving, to remind myself I still had agency. I read books not to pass the time but to fill my mind again, because I realized I had given so much of myself away over the years, my time, my energy, my identity, that I forgot how to simply be with myself. And then something shifted. Slowly, quietly, I started to remember who I was before I was anyone's mother. Before I was someone's wife. I was a woman who had dreams, who had opinions, who used to laugh so hard she couldn't breathe. That woman was still in there, buried, bruised, but not broken. I started writing again. Nothing fancy, just journaling. Thoughts, memories, even letters I'd never send. It was like sweeping the dust off the parts of myself I hadn't touched in decades. And one day, as I was writing, I stopped mid-sentence and thought, wait a minute. I'm still here. I survived. And that realization was electric. Because for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a victim. I didn't feel weak. Felt awake. Like someone had flipped a switch. See, when people hurt you, especially the ones you love, it can feel like they've taken everything. Your confidence. Your worth. Or power. But what I realized in that quiet, lonely room is that nobody gets to take those things unless you hand them over. And I had been handing mine over for years. Not just when he put me in that nursing home. Long before that. Every time I bit my tongue. Every time I made myself small to keep the peace. Every time I said, I'm fine when I wasn't. That wasn't love. That was fear dressed up as love. But once you see it, once you name it, you can't unsee it. I started choosing differently. I stopped apologizing for taking up space. I stopped shrinking to fit into someone else's comfort zone. I stopped waiting to be chosen. Chose myself. And let me tell you something, that changes everything. Doesn't mean you stop loving the people who hurt you. It just means you stop letting that love be a weapon used against you. People ask me sometimes, aren't you angry? And the truth is, I was. Course I was. Anger is natural. But under that anger was something stronger. Clarity. Clarity that I am not a burden. I am not disposable. I am not a mistake. I am a whole, complicated, powerful human being who deserves to be treated with dignity. And that kind of clarity, that's a gift. One I never would have found if I hadn't been forced to sit in the silence and look at the wreckage for what it really was. I didn't rise out of that place like some hero in a movie. There was no grand comeback. No big speech. I just decided moment by moment that I was worth fighting for, even if I was the only one in the ring. And every time I made that choice, the weight got a little lighter. The air got a little clearer. The world slowly started to feel like mine again. Because when you find strength in rejection, you don't just survive what tried to break you. You become something it can never touch. You know, people like to throw around the word burden like it's a label you can slap on someone and walk away clean. Like if you call it what it is, at least what you think it is, you've somehow justified the way you treat them. That's exactly what my son did. He gave me a name I didn't ask for, and he thought that would be the end of the story. But what he didn't realize was that by calling me a burden, he handed me permission to show him what one really feels like. And no, I'm not talking about revenge. I'm not talking about spite or anger or some kind of plot to make him pay. That's not who I am. That's not what this is about. What I gave him wasn't punishment, it was weight. A weight he didn't see coming. A weight made of truth. See, when someone throws you away, what they don't expect is for you to stop chasing them. They don't expect the silence. They don't expect the absence. Because whether they admit it or not, they rely on the idea that you'll always be there. That you'll always take the call. That you'll always forgive. That you'll bend, break, come back. But I didn't. I left that house, I packed my things, and I let him sit with the decision he made. I didn't call to check in. I didn't ask for visits. I didn't write letters hoping to remind him of who I used to be to him. I gave him the full experience of what it means to truly let someone go. Not out of hate, but out of respect for myself. And at first, he didn't care. At least that's what it looked like. He went on with his life. Didn't visit. Didn't ask questions. He assumed I was handled. That I was in someone else's care now. Someone else's problem. That's what we do, right? We pay people to carry what we no longer want to deal with. But something interesting started to happen. Little cracks began to show. He stopped responding to his friends as quickly. He didn't seem as confident in family conversations anymore. He avoided certain topics. Because deep down he knew. People noticed. His wife asked why I wasn't around. His kids started asking questions. Why doesn't grandma visit anymore? Where did she go? And just like that, the real burden began to grow. Not me, but the story. The one he told. The one he used to justify his decision. Because the truth always waits. Doesn't need to yell. It doesn't need to chase. It just stands there, quiet and patient, while the lies wear themselves out. I became the weight in his silence. The name he couldn't bring up at dinner without feeling a little sting in his chest. I became the mirror he didn't want to look into. Because I didn't need to do anything for him to feel it. I just had to stop doing everything. You want to know what a real burden is? It's the guilt that creeps in when you finally understand what you threw away. It's waking up at night wondering if that person you cast aside is still alive. If they're okay. If they think about you. And more than that, if they'll ever forgive you. He thought I'd crumble. He thought I'd beg my way back into his good graces. That's what people assume when they've mistaken your love for weakness. But love isn't weak. Not when it's honest. Not when it's earned. Love has boundaries. And when it doesn't, becomes servitude. I gave him a burden, yes, but it wasn't mine. It was his. It was the burden of his choices. The weight of his silence. The echo of my absence in the life I helped him build. And trust me, that burden. That's the one he never expected to carry. Because when someone who raised you with grace and strength suddenly isn't there, when they don't pick up, don't show up, don't sweep things under the rug like they used to, it forces you to confront what you've done. Not with words. Not with drama. But with stillness. And I saw it. A shift. Months passed, and the calls started. Hesitant at first. Surface level. Just checking in. But I knew what was behind them. I could hear it in his voice. The weight was finally sinking in. The easy explanation didn't hold up anymore. He was starting to realize that getting rid of someone doesn't get rid of the responsibility. Just delays the cost. So yes, he gave me the name of a burden. But I gave him the reality of what it feels like to live without someone who loved you more than they ever loved themselves. And he felt it. You know what happens when someone calls you a burden and then walks away, convinced they've lightened their load? First, you feel gutted. You question your worth. You question the entire history you shared with them. But eventually, if you let yourself sit in the discomfort long enough, something starts to happen. A kind of quiet defiance wakes up in you. A small, trembling voice that says, wait, I'm still here. I still matter. That voice was soft at first. I barely noticed it. But I started to listen. Not because I had some big, empowering plan. I didn't. I was just trying to get through the day without crying. Trying to survive being dropped by someone I had once carried through every storm. But the thing is, surviving teaches you more than comfort ever will. And the more I sat with my pain, the more it transformed into something else. Not bitterness, not anger, but awareness, the awareness of who I had become. I had spent so many years showing up for other people that I forgot I had the right to show up for myself. I was always the one who smoothed things over, who made excuses, who kept the peace even when it chipped away at my spirit. That's what mothers do, right? We hold the center. We don't shake the table. We absorb. But here's the thing, they teach us how to give, but they never teach us how to stop giving when it starts costing too much. They never teach us how to set boundaries with the very people we raised. And somewhere along the way, I started believing that love meant sacrifice, even if it meant sacrificing me. And when I finally had nothing left to give, when I was tired, vulnerable, and needing care in return, that's when I became too much. It's strange. The people who take the most from you are always the first to tell you you're asking for too much. But I wasn't asking for the world. I was asking for dignity, for space, for the same love I had poured into him without a second thought. So no, I didn't go back to being who I was before. That woman is gone. She served her purpose, and she did it beautifully. But now I'm someone else. Someone who knows the difference between being needed and being used. Someone who doesn't shrink just to keep someone else comfortable. Because when someone tells you you're a burden, what they're really saying is, your needs inconvenience me. And that's a hard thing to hear from your own child. But it's also a gift in a very twisted way. It shows you exactly where you stand. Not in theory, not in memories, but in their reality. And when you know where you stand, you can stop begging to be chosen. I stopped bending. I stopped softening my voice. I stopped keeping the peace at the expense of my own. I started speaking plainly. I started taking up space. I started living with the belief that I don't owe anyone comfort if it means abandoning myself. And people feel that shift. My son felt it. The first few times he called, I stayed quiet. Not cold. Not cruel. Just calm. Clear. I didn't give him what he was used to. The easy forgiveness, the instant reassurance. I let him feel the space he created. And you know what happened? The calls kept coming. Tone changed. The defenses started to fall. Because when you stop making yourself small for other people, they either rise to meet you or they fade. And that's not something to fear. That's something to accept. I didn't need him to grovel. I didn't need some perfect apology. I just needed honesty, ownership, a real conversation. And slowly that started to happen. But it only happened because I had the courage to stop carrying the weight of someone else's choices. See, the most radical thing you can do after being rejected is not to fight your way back. It's to stand still. To root yourself in your own truth and say, if you want access to me again, you come correct. No more twisting yourself into knots to be lovable. No more explaining your humanity. I'm not the same woman who walked into that nursing home with her heart shattered. I've grown edges where I used to have wounds. I've built boundaries where there used to be open doors. And it's not because I stopped loving, it's because I started loving myself. So when he says now, Mom, I miss you, I don't rush in to erase the past. I let it hang there. I let him sit in the pause. Because growth doesn't happen in comfort. It happens in the space where you finally understand what your choices cost. And he's learning. The burden I gave him wasn't revenge. It was the truth. The unvarnished, unbending truth of who I am and what I deserve. The thing about letting someone go is that you expect the hard part to be the separation, the goodbye, the silence, the empty seat at the table. But that's not it. The real challenge comes after, when you realize the story isn't over just because the relationship shifted. People grow. People stumble into truth. And sometimes the ones who broke you are the same ones who come back, just not in the way you left them. That happened with my son. It didn't start with a grand apology. It rarely does. It started with hesitation. Few awkward phone calls. A birthday card in the mail that felt more like obligation than love. And then, slowly, pieces of vulnerability started to slip through the cracks. He'd mentioned something from his childhood, almost like he was checking to see if I remembered it too. He'd ask how I was sleeping. He'd share a frustration from work and wait to hear if I cared. And I did care. I always had. But I wasn't going to make it easy anymore. I wasn't going to step back into a relationship that cost me so much just because he finally missed the version of me who said yes to everything. I needed to know it was real. That he understood. Not just what he'd done, but who I'd become because of it. One day he asked to visit. Just like that. Can I come see you? There was a pause, like he wasn't sure I'd say yes. And to be honest, I wasn't sure either. I sat with it. I asked myself if I wanted closure, or if I was hoping for transformation. And I realized, I didn't need anything from him. Not anymore. I just needed to show up for me whatever happened next. He came. He looked different. A little older. A little smaller. Regret has a way of wearing people down. And when he walked into that room, I didn't see the man who sent me away. I saw the boy who used to run to me after scraping his knees. The boy who needed comfort but never quite learned how to give it back. He sat across from me, and for a moment we didn't speak. And then he said, "I didn't know what I was doing. I thought I was doing the right thing. I just felt overwhelmed." And that's when I realized. He had been carrying the burden after all. Not in the way I intended. But he was carrying it in the tightness of his shoulders, in the hesitation in his voice, in the way he kept fidgeting like he was afraid I might reject him the way he had rejected me. I didn't offer a hug. I didn't make it comfortable. I just let it sit. Let him feel the weight of what it means to truly face someone you've hurt without running away from the consequence. And then softly I said, "I know you were overwhelmed. But I needed you to see me. Not just the version of me that made life easy for you. I needed you to see that I have needs too. And when you pushed me aside, you weren't just reorganizing your life. You were erasing part of mine." He cried. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just that quiet kind of crying that happens when a truth finally breaks through all the excuses. And something softened in me too. Not because I wanted to go back to how things were, but because I could see him trying. Not to undo the past, but to own it. That's what healing looks like. Not pretty. Not perfect. Just honest. I didn't say, "It's okay," because it wasn't. But I said, "I see you." And for the first time in a long time, I think he saw me too. Not just as his mother, not as the caretaker, not as the burden, but as a whole human being. We still have a long road ahead. The damage doesn't disappear just because someone apologizes. But the door cracked open. Not wide. Just enough. Enough to let light back in. Enough to begin again. Not from the same starting point, but from a place that's grounded in truth. And I want you to hear this. Letting someone back in doesn't mean you forget what they did. It means you remember who you are while deciding if they're capable of meeting you where you now stand. Forgiveness, for me, didn't mean erasing what happened. It meant making peace with the fact that it happened, and choosing what comes next with eyes wide open. Because love without accountability is just a trap. But love that grows out of truth, that can be a beginning. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't to close the door forever. It's to open it just enough to see who's really willing to walk through it the right way.